Hey everyone, welcome to the theme parks, the good and the bad and the weird, presented by me, Sam Williamson. This is going to be a lecture panel where I basically showcase many different theme parks around the world. I just kind of splurge over my love and interest for them. So I hope you get to enjoy. Please remember to keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside your seat at all times and be seated until the panel comes to a complete stop. Or not, because you could be watching this at home and you can do whatever you want. Now, let's actually go take a dive right in and get this panel started, shall we? So, as you can tell, we were going to go first start off with the initial given title of the panel, which is the good. And we are greeted here with the Osiris roller coaster at Parc Asterie in France. But our first park is not exactly in France, it is actually in Colombia, where we will go to the one and only Parque del Cafe, or Coffee Park in English. Now, this park is kind of what it sounds like. It is a whole theme park based around coffee and the connections that Colombia has with this industry. Housing what I think were once real life sort of coffee plantations, but now I've converted them into more so museums and exhibits alongside this the big rural Colombian sort of forest, and you can kind of see the little mountains there. Now this is though actually at a theme park, as in it has like rides, like this roller coaster, the big Ferris kind of stuff. We could also go horseback riding, which I thought was pretty interesting. But to me, it's not just going to these rides that are worth it. It's just getting that incredible view of this insanely lush, just nature and the Colombian forest around it, and just being able to absorb it all. I think that's just the really special thing about it. So if you ever can find yourself down in Colombia, I would recommend you try to hit up this park if you can. So, yeah. Now, on to our next park, though, is we'll go down a bit further south to Argentina, where we go to the also fairly unique Children's Republic, which is indeed a theme park, but not so much as one filled with rides, but one oriented around kind of like what it sounds, being sort of a place for kids. Now, I think this park looks a little bit like Disney, but it actually opened before Disneyland in 1951, and it was actually, I believe, built and sponsored by an Eva Peron kind of foundation, and it's meant to basically kind of provide kids the opportunity to learn about several different kind of adult roles and tasks that would exist in sort of a highly structured society, like in government or in the medical field or in some sort of hospitality kind of business, but also teach kids about different types of, like, say, architecture, or relationships between that with, what's more rural, what's more urban, maybe stuff that's more international, like I guess this Islamic one that I'm not entirely sure what specific building or style that it's based off of, but it's a cool place if you have like kids that you can bring them there. Now, obviously, they do have like little rides or little tasks that you can do, so that it's not just walking around and information based, but it's a very unique thing and something I sort of see reincarnated by like what used to be like the Wanadu City place down in South Florida. And I think another place called Kidzania that has a similar idea, but this one was the first, and I think it's pretty cool. So that's unfortunately going to be it, though, for the Americas. We're now going to go jump across the pond into our one and only park in the entire continent of Africa, which is very unfortunate, but for this standard of just theme parks that I'm trying to present, I could only find one, and that one is the one and only. Goldberry City in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is not just a theme park as you see here, but is also sort of a resort with like museums and like hotels, I think a casino. And maybe a bit sort of seen in the title, it's the big theme to this, I think, is kind of cool and something not that everyone associates with South Africa first and foremost, which is basically the fact that South Africa is filled with lots and lots of trains. Like they're everywhere. Like in this like just look at them. They're just like plopped around. There's not even like a plaque on them or anything. They're just kind of there because they're cool. In fact, they decided to theme not one or two, but at least three like roller coasters, two trains in some way, shape, or form, because that's just how prevalent they are. Like we got the runaway train, which is like a little power coaster that goes through like the mountains or the little rock canyons and stuff. We got the Josie Express, I guess, which is sort of like a thrill coaster or a very thrilling family kind of coaster thing, but still got the train. And then perhaps one of the most unique roller coasters in the world, and certainly the most unique coaster at this park, the Tower of Terror. Not Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, but the Tower of Terror. That's why Disney can't get to you. Now, this is pretty impressive in that the main infrastructure for this roller coaster is actually built into what was at one point a real life mine shaft that got transported away from somewhere in South Africa into this here park, where the track is basically bolted to the big structure, and it just goes to the top and dives right down into, I guess, the dark depths below. And fun fact was that this used to be the coaster that had the highest amount of G forces ever experienced on any roller coaster ever. Where when it first was testing, it got up to I believe like 6.3 at the very bottom of it, which was incredibly intense. So much so that they really just had to modify because I think that would just literally injure people. And also, a cute little thing is that when they had to close the ride for maintenance, they blocked off the entrance by just placing like a train right in front of it. Because why not? There's so many of them here there in South Africa. And one more little ride though is actually Anaconda, a pretty impressive looking inverted roller coaster. But this is a unique one for the roller coaster enthusiasts like myself because it's not manufactured by B&M, who typically do like coasters like Montu or the late Dragon Challenge. They do. This is actually by a company called Giovanola, who kind of in the same country and a bit nearby had relations with B&M and stuff, but they only had two other roller coasters beyond this. But the way you could tell that this is by Giovanola is that they use these two-seater inverted cars rather than the distinctive four-seat that we see in like Montu or again the many other roller coasters that I mentioned or are made by B&M. So very unique park for such a seemingly more obscure location compared to a lot of the other major theme parks. So Goldberry City, I think that's a place you should go to as well if you're in Johannesburg. But again, unfortunately, I have no other parks to show you in the entire continent of Africa. So we're going to have to go all the way back up north, which from the very furthest country away from Europe to our very next location, which is in the United Kingdom. So we cross the Mediterranean Sea, go into the North Sea, I think, to good old Alton Towers. Maybe you've heard of this park. Maybe you played Roller Coaster Tycoon and got to see that one map back in the day. But if you're not familiar, this is it's a very large theme park in the United Kingdom, certainly the largest in England. But the main history of it was that it was actually at one point a real life kind of manor with a big royal family and this, I guess, sort of countryish side, as it was 20 miles away from the nearest sort of city nowadays, which I think is Uttoxeter. But the thing is, I forget how it happened, but I believe the main family who ran the place kind of lost financial support for these big, just this big manor, and unfortunately, it became derelict as the years went by. And this is still seen today when you can go visit the park, where a lot of the windows, a lot of the floors seem to be gone or at least destroyed. But because this is such an elaborate little place, it wasn't enough to say just like, oh, we're just going to leave it rot, because there's also a huge garden. Just it's hard to see in these pictures, but it just like goes down this big ravine that people were feeling really inspired to still keep this place going, even if the castle that used to predominate here, the towers rather, are just not in their top form like they used to be. And eventually, this inspired the people who run this park to even open up a roller coaster here, which was Corkscrew, which is a now obviously defunct roller coaster that's in honor of it being the first, I think, major roller coaster at the park, lives on in front of the entrance. But this basically led to Alton Towers growing into what is now, I believe, the UK's, again, largest theme park that just stretches to so many bounds. It has a lot of very unique and record smashing roller coasters, or at least they did when they opened, such as the world's first diving roller coaster, Oblivion, the world's first roller coaster with a vertical track drop, 13, which, if you've done Hagrid's like motorbike adventure at House of Adventure, you know what I'm talking about, along with having a ride themed to the Wicker Man and Galactica, a superb flying roller coaster. And they also have the record for the roller coaster with the largest amount of inversions, the Smiler, which goes upside down 14 times. Now, the big thing about the roller coasters here at Alton Towers is that they can't be higher than the trees because Alton Towers are surrounded by such a high amount of farm life that roller coasters that are too tall will cause too many like guests to scream, which will disturb the cattle and the sheep, causing them to not want to breed very much. So they're restricted to keeping the park below the tree line, and so this causes Alton Towers to just try to come up with their absolute most creative endeavors to really make their mark on the map. And this is included with one of the very first major roller coasters, one of my personal favorite roller coasters, Nemesis. It's hard to see in this picture or in the pictures I'll show, but this is an awesome roller coaster. It is just so forceful, it is so intertwining, and it's themed to a crazy, weird, Lovecraftian kind of creature or whatever. It's great. But that'll be it for On Towers for now. We'll come back to it actually later. Will we now go across the sea again and down into the mainland, where we go to our very first park in France, which is Port de Foix, or Puy de Foix. I don't understand French. That was an epic French moment brought to you by me, where this is not entirely a theme park filled with a bunch of roller coasters, but it's mainly one built off of shows. And they try to go all out with being impressive on these shows. There's actually 26 of them, all of them lasting about a half an hour to 40-ish minutes, such as your bird show with, seasonal just times with like hot air balloons and just several other birds around, but having a little stories being interconnected with it, such as teaching on how to use it. But also other highlights include the Viking show with explosions and horseback ride, as well as the Olympic Coliseum show, where they have, I believe, actual races, and as you can kind of tell, camels, I think lions, other animals, along with this pretty cool looking semi recreation of the one and only Coliseum. But it's not just shows, too. They also have some remarkably well-themed middle-aged sort of village recreations with I think some housing like animatronics that come out and like sing, you know. So this would be a really cool place if you're into that kind of stuff and obviously speak French. But we gotta move on to another particularly great and one park that I would love to visit. I think is very well championed by a lot of European theme park enthusiasts. It's the one and only Efteling out in the Netherlands. This, I think, is a remarkable theme park that is kind of intertwined in a way that's all about telling, having the story not exactly be told to you, but you rather interpreting the story on your own, if that makes sense. As in, there's not always the story blatantly said on what's happening, but it's more about what you take from it and how you interpret it. And they, I think, take this philosophy and really run with it throughout a lot of their different attractions in the many ways that they come. And I think they also really approach this too in the style of theming, where it's not about exactly creating the most total out of this world existence with what you got, but really just working with the natural surroundings of, say, the Netherlands. And it creates such a beautiful park, you know, like one that's almost in a way where it's like just everyone shares the beauty, both the guests and the creators who help run Efteling. And this all kind of was rooted back in the park's like sort of really small initial stages too, when they had just a little classic like fairy tale walkthrough with different like animatronics, such as this little story tree who tells up to like I think 70 different stories all in Dutch that you can still kind of go through today. But obviously, since fairy tale walkthroughs aren't exactly the most in nowadays, this kind of transitioned into what we would now later see with a lot of the rides that operate in Efteling, such as with the Fata Morgana boat ride, which is, I guess, similar to something like Pirates of the Caribbean, where you're on a boat. It's kind of slow moving, but there's several different scenes of the well-known Fata Morgana from the Thousand and One Nights sort of tales of Arabian like little mysteries and stories, you know, where each scene has like different smells, different lights, different characters to see. It's a lot better to capture on film than, or in real life than on film, rather. Excuse me. But it's also seen in one of my favorite looking dark rides, Droomvlucht. That was an epic Dutch moment brought to you by me. Or Dream Flight in English, which is, again, going back to that sort of the guest is able to have their own experience with the ride, which is not one that's built off of exactly a well connecting story, but more so scenes of various sort of like little elf and gnomish creatures that just sort of roam this little world that was created for the flight that you get to see and just sort of take in the aura. And I think that's a really cool way, again, to tell their own story that's while still remaining at a really high level of theming and still being really immersive. So I really like this park if you can't tell. There's also this ride, which I forget the name of it. I think it's like a Fantasia or something, which is like a trackless ride that goes through many different cool scenes that has like a different sort of story depending on which car you end up. I recommend you go look it up because it's quite something I don't want to spoil just yet. But they also got a selection of roller coasters too. Like this year, Flying Dutchman, which is kind of like what it sounds. It's a bit of a darker sort of journey roller coaster where you just go through a couple of crazy scenes with the famed kind of Flying Dutchman sort of tale, with the ride's main climax being that you drop out of this little lift, turn around, and splash into the lake nearby. And because that kind of accompanies the setting, not sort of, not really, is this here Joris and the Draak roller coaster, which is like a dual racing wind coaster. So a lot of stuff, a lot of interpretation and integration with sort of European Dutch kind of storytelling. There's really a lot that I'm not being able to show. But if you're not a fan of the more subtle, not laid back, but just wide range approach to theming that Efteling has to offer, then hopefully I have the good alternative for you, which is Germany's Phantasialand, a park that has such little space, but boy oh boy, do the park runners just cram just as much detail into it as much as they possibly can in whatever little amount of space that they got. And this we could see here, even within this sort of fantasy area that they got. I don't remember what exactly it's called, but there's like an indoor and outdoor section, with the indoor housing this sort of tower ride themed to, I think, like the goose, and these roller coasters called winges that are dual spinning. Like one goes this way, the other one goes that one, and this is kind of a theme you'll notice with the roller coasters here at Fantasyland, is that they're very wide and winding. They're not like compact in the way that they're skinny or like small. They just really traverse the land, which is a really cool look that I hope you'll be able to appreciate. But they also got some other interesting rides, like this Hollywood sort of ride with like Alfred Hitchcock and like Jaws, and another little outdoor boat ride that I wish I had more pictures of, but I don't. But we gotta move on to this cute little ride. It's the Masa Chocolate shooting ride. And the story behind this is that there's a little bakery in Berlin that got overrun by a bunch of rats. And you, as an exterminator, can't just kill the rats, because you can't just throw like toxic, just pollutant into like a bakery, because that'll get everyone sick. But you gotta stuff rats with chocolate and mousse, and you can kind of see in the little guns that they got that they're just big like icing kind of bags that you just kind of fire out and fill all the rats up until they're just stuffed. I think that's great, because I don't ever like to kill rats. But this park's more than just Berlin to fantasy. They got a whole area themed to Mexico with some pretty crazy looking stuff. Like they, for one, got the Chiapas log flume, which is kind of about you being sort of an explorer for trying to find the lost city of Chiapas and whatnot, featuring like a whole rave scene. It'll make sense when you ride the ride. It's got the one and only Michael Jackson thrill ride, because I think Michael Jackson was here when the coaster opened, but the Colorado Adventure, which is sort of the mine train roller coaster, and as you can see, again, is pretty winding and twisting all around the given narrow sort of spaces. But also, it houses what's possibly the most impressively themed flat ride like ever, Talocan. Just look at it. I can't believe my eyes. I love it so much. Ugh. It's so cool, man. But moving on, we've also now are going into the Africa, quote unquote, park, which is, I guess, just different parts of several different countries of Africa kind of congealed into one, maybe a sort of a weird way. But it does have this really cool Black Mamba roller coaster, which, once again, close to the ground, almost comes near like big fake rock work. That's really cool. Maybe not, so it's not fake, but if you notice this building in the background too, this is actually a hotel. It's not just simply there for show. We got some more though, because there's some even more special stuff than just simply recreating like real life locations. Like we got this here mystery area, which is almost like, not so sure if it's entirely gothic, but it's very, it has that cool look in my opinion. It's got specifically one of the most acclaimed coasters in all of Europe, not just Germany, Terran, which is again a very twisting, intertwining roller coaster that kind of just goes through the many rocky just ravines and little crevices and little caves that are just all constructed by hand, by the way. and keep in mind. So, excuse me, it's just, I think it's great. And this one just goes real fast. It doesn't really go upside down, but it's again just theming to the max, fun to the max. I'm all for it. And new last year is in fact an area themed to steampunk, which I think is the first specific area I can think of that's really themed to that, at least in the way that I've seen here, with the now longest flying roller coaster in the world, which is simply just called Fly. It has dots between it, like F dot L dot Y, but you know, once again, incredible theming, just swirling all around in this really cool place that I would absolutely love to keep going and to keep on expanding. So that there was Fantasyland. Now the parks that we've just seen are mainly some of the more newer ones, which there's nothing wrong with, but we gotta remember that there's always going to be classics and foundation kind of parks that we would normally see out in somewhere like Europe, especially in terms of theme park history. So I present to everyone the one and only world famous Tivoli Gardens, one of the oldest theme parks in the world. Been operating, I believe, since the 19th century. In fact, was a prime influence for Walt Disney himself when trying to come up with Disney World. And you can kind of see the really old school theming to it in just the way that some of the buildings look and just the designs of them. It has this very World Fair quality to it, which I think is really cool. And you can also kind of see this further played out with some of the old rides that they got, such as the Ruhenbahn. That's not what it's called. That was a very, very special Danish moment brought to you by me, which is just one of a very, very classic roller coaster in the truest sense. And what I mean, not just in terms of theming or even simplicity, but in matter of just how it operates. For one, notice that in the station, there are no brakes underneath the track. That's because the brakes on this roller coaster are actually operated by a person who's an employee who sits on the ride, braking the train just in very certain specific moments. And this is so that the car doesn't just derail because there are no understock wheels that keep the train on the track. It's just basically like classic railway trains. But and this is a very kind of like old school kind of thing, but just because Tivoli Gardens represents a lot of old school quality, it means that they're exactly all about just being retro. And they are willing to keep up with more new theming and highly immersive backgrounds, just like any other park. In a way, Tivoli Gardens will never be complete. And while I know Disneyland fans will like to quote how Walt Disney once said, like, Disneyland will never be finished, but Walt Disney was actually inspired by, I believe, the owner of Tivoli Gardens, who basically said the same thing about, well, Tivoli Gardens, and that it will, in a sense, never be complete. It's so funny how I mentioned I'm not going to talk about Disney, but I can't stop saying his name. But regardless, I think this is a really cool area. I love these lamps. And there's also an area themed around another kind of, I guess, classic area where it sort of once again congeals another very, what I think is a very diverse sort of sense of architecture and design with, I guess, sort of East Asia, maybe specifically China or Japanese or Korean architecture, but I'm not entirely sure if it just kind of combines it all into one thing with this ride or area, but it is what it is, and I think you could always just like how the owner mentioned that's never going to be done. I think it could once again change, but it does house the Daemonin roller coaster, which you kind of see all of it. It's not a very big roller coaster. What you see is basically what you get, which is it's small, but what can you do? This is a very by definition, urban park. It does, though, house one of the most intense flat rides, though, that you'll ever see is your Tivoli Gardens. Vertigo, which is kind of like those big skyscraper propeller rides, except rather than just flip on, like, say, the X and Y axis, it adds in a Z axis. So now you're turning just like to the sides while you're spinning out of control at the edge of like a big arm. I love it. I want to ride it. Now, I do say, well, if you do ever get the chance to go to Tivoli Gardens or even Copenhagen and whatnot, try and see if you can visit this park at night when I think the real kind of retro, sort of classic look to this park really shines out with just the way that the lights are like configured on all the ornaments. Like just look at like these spirals. Well, they kind of like have these candy canes. They're all on like the tops, on like the crown moldings. I think it just looks magical. So I'd love to go to Tivoli Gardens. And that, though, will be it for, I believe, the parks that we have in Europe. And we will now. I unfortunately could not get enough parks. I would love to show more because I could just spend all day showing people just parks I think are absolutely wonderful. But we're going to be a bit limited on time, so unfortunately, I'll have to show only one park I have in China, which is one that I think is very much worth it. Though it is the unbelievable China Dinosaurs Park, which is not just a park with dinosaurs exactly, but it's got dinosaurs clad in armor who are just ready to battle. Like there's even like soldiers on top. They got all these weapons. You can just stand in front and get your picture taken of them. They even have like a military band just playing and ready to march down, go to war with these here, I guess, dinosaurs or something. And just look at the theming too. Like we got these pterodon like rocks, these wonderful waterfalls. You even got like King Kong attraction. It's look at it's so swift. I love it. I can't believe it. And we haven't even talked about their big roller coaster yet, Dinoconda, which is another just insane roller coaster. Because here's how it works. This is the front of the car. If you can see here, the seats by the gate outside. But the thing is that there's two sets of wheels that this train would carry, or at least two sets of rails that the track carries. Sorry, one that supports the train to just keep them on the tracks, but also one that controls the location of these seats, where they can determine that by allowing the seats to shift upwards and flip over. So at certain points of the ride, if you're just going down, the seats will literally just flip up and just go straight down or just twist in some way, shape, or other. So, sounds expensive, right? Well, it is. And I bet you that it's absolutely crazy. And I would absolutely love to ride it. But the closest I'm going to get to it, or that most people I think in the US are going to get to it, is either by riding X2 out in Six Flags Magic Mountain and SoCal, or Ijanika out in Japan. Now, that will unfortunately be it, though, for our here good parks. Again, I would love to show so much more, but we gotta move on, which means that, well, that only means one thing. We get out of the good and go to the bad. Oh no. What's going to be so bad about theme parks? Well, truthfully, I'm not sure there's a whole lot as far as theming goes, but there's some that are weird and that are bad. But I think we can't really start a topic about bad theme parks or bad amusement parks without mentioning probably the definitive one of all, Action Park. Now, you may be familiar with it, maybe you're not, but long story short about Action Park is that it's not exactly a big like theme park. It was more so a water park that had additional kind of race tracks and like alpine slides, but it was one of the earlier ones that kind of helped pioneer a lot of the kind of stuff that we would normally see today. But what made Action Park really stand out compared to some of the other early water parks, like say Wet n Wild, was Action Park's well-known, really, really, really high standard for safety and guest security, as you can see. In fact, the okay, no, there was this park was kind of known for being a bit like people getting constantly injured or even like deaths were to occur in this park. Which, keep in mind, the amount of people that would get hurt in the park at this kind of era when theme parks were still kind of a new thing back in the early water parks or were back in the 70s and 80s, it's pretty high. And it really did kind of help earn this park a name just outside of its original New Jersey area. And 6 deaths that were confirmed to be at this park. One was when a guest, or I think an employee, flew off these here alpine slides. I think they hit their head on a rock. 3 guests were known to have drowned in the wave pool. There was a guest who slipped out of this canoe ride and got electrocuted. And there was another death related to the fact that this Tarzan swing ride featured the pool with water that was filtered from a local or nearby spring, which, in other words, meant that the water was chillingly cold to an unwitting guest. And I think that's what happened with one who didn't expect the water to be so cold and either had some sort of heart attack or even just drowned because of such a crazy time. And this is just kind of the whole story behind Action Park. Like every ride was just featured with some kind of weird like story or any kind of thing that you can come up with. It always had some weird edge of like something was wrong with it though that just made it dangerous. Like even these like go-karts, like employees figured out how to shove tennis balls into the governors, which made them go like 60 miles per hour, excuse me, faster than they would normally go, which meant to some guests that meant you could play maybe even 60 miles per hour bumper cars, except without any like car like airbags. Fun. Perhaps though the most infamous attraction that just sort of ever defines Action Park whatsoever was none other than the completely out of this world Cannonball Loop water slide, which is just as good as it looks. So it sucks, basically. It operated, I think, for like only a couple of months ever and just remained kind of there because it was just not a terribly good idea. But it happened and it just cemented Action Park into what we know today as Action Park, as just, the most crazy place ever. Now, Action Park didn't exactly go away once it closed, though. Not in terms of that, obviously, Action Park isn't Action Park anymore, but a lot of the foundations that was built there, say with the connections with a lot of the rock work and some of the other attractions found, is still used today as part of a new water park resort nowadays called Mountain Creek, which is still up in New Jersey, and I believe is still open, and they still got some racetracks, and they still got some like little alpine tracks that you can go skid down if you want. So that was a very brief story of Action Park. Not really a thing with theme parks, so let me introduce you to something that has which is possibly the worst idea for any theme park ever. The worst concept for a theme of any park I would ever show. So I have to warn you though, if you're afraid of clowns, look away for the next couple of minutes. Because I have to introduce you to Mr. Blobby. Now, what the heck are you looking at here? Well, this just chicken poxed potato man is the creation of actually this guy on your right, Noah Edmond, as like a kind of a skit character on a show of his where he would have like a guest and he'd interview them, but suddenly out of nowhere he'd have like this Mr. Blobby thing pop out and just sort of make them uncomfortable, which it's kind of like an Eric Andre skit in a way, but somehow his popularity went full circle where people liked him because he was like clumsy and trashy to the point where they decided to make not just one or two, but technically three theme parks built around this thing. You can go to his house, go see a Mr. Blobby nurse, and then go check out the Mr. Blobby Gardens. Just the ultimate things every single kid would want. Actually, you know what? In fact, these three parks, they were such good ideas that when they opened in the 90s, they all closed in the 90s. Just what we all want. In fact, when one of them was closing, Noah Edmonds was getting sued by some of the construction workers of one of the parks because there was just some kind of like they weren't getting paid enough. So just an extra cherry on top for this wonderful story of Mr. Blobby, and even another one for good old Noel Edmonds, who is a very weird person, by the way, if you ever go look him up. So that's Mr. Blobby Land, or whatever it is now. For me, though, most theme parks, bad theme parks are just not really that interesting to talk about because they're just kind of bad, but not because, again, like they're filled with some ridiculous theme or they're just kind of funny to talk about. They're just kind of it's just kind of a they're not really like that terribly remarkable. So they all kind of end up looking the same in a way, where it's just kind of it's just cheap and stuff. So next park though I want to show you is, while I think maybe a pinnacle of that, rather than just point out the obvious on like why this park is bad, which I guess I'm still going to end up making fun of it while featuring this in a way. I don't want to just make fun of it blatantly by making dumb little jokes. I instead want to talk about why trying to operate a theme park is probably one of the most risky things that you could do as a business ever. So let me show you what by some were calling maybe the worst amusement park ever. Which, keep in mind, these pictures were taken when the park was open. None other than the former Fantasyland that was once called home in Alexandria, Egypt. Now, the thing about theme parks, or any kind of amusement park in general, is that you always are going to have to employ like some kind of architect to, I guess, design the way on how it should flows. Not in terms of because its theme parks are directly related to architecture and how they reflect, like, say, the building materials and the sort of resources that are reflected nearby, but more so in a way that captures, people's like joy and sort of, or just comfort, and that they feel like they can walk into a place, feel like it's home, and just see it as what it is and have a good time. It's a place for recreation, and that does take very keen planning on how to operate, like, say, like path designs and buildings layouts to make sure that's not only attractive for guests and feel like it's what it is, but many other things like that. But also in an amusement park or a theme park, if you have rides, those are going to cost you just as much as anything else, because if you want to get like a tractor ride like this, like say a monorail or a roller coaster, you got to pay a company that will manufacture the model, which includes having to make the trains, having to have a company that maybe specializes in electronics for the train, maybe another company that will come up with the supports and the track. But then this all has to be shipped out from very specific places. Not all are always in the same country or even the same continent onto the given location, which again, that's going to cost a lot of money. And then once these track pieces and like goodies arrive, you have to construct it. So you then have to hire another company to install the footers, put up the supports, weld the track, create a platform, have a control box that wires all the electronics so that the brakes all work and that the ride is able to like release the restraints. And that's just to get the ride on its bare like legs. That's just to have it with a platform up in the sky. That's not accounting for additional costs for additional maintenance, which may or may not be easy to get considering how old a ride can turn. You then have to come up with, say, a queue and maybe theming for that. You then have to make sure that the ride continues to work without any sort of like issue with the just the mechanics of it. It's gonna be quite a complex nightmare if you're not prepared for it. So this has to in turn be caused and helped by sort of janitors, or not just janitors, but any sort of like handymen who helped kind of keep the park in shape, making sure that not just the rides like that are operating at a full level, but that there's constantly a sense of control over the way a park looks. And this is going to be in terms of, say, the foliage as well as designs and other sort of things like that, and making sure that guests also are not themselves harming the park or ending up just trying to make their own rules when you're wanting to have a certain image or look that appeals to everyone. And if you don't, then, well, things can happen and, it can all turn down south. Now, obviously, even when you have all of these elements under control, trying to operate an amusement park doesn't exactly mean that you'll be successful at it, because you then have to really account in even further broader things that sometimes you can't always really influence as basically like a theme park, as in there's going to be given environmental circumstances that will come and go or just arrive that people will have to adjust, or if they can't, like, say, economy situations, like maybe not everyone can afford to pay for it anymore, or even if some sort of conflict breaks out, whether it's war or some kind of government crisis, that's certainly going to turn away some people to focus more on their own personal lives, or even just changes with the actual like geological environment, where a park could become heavily damaged from like natural disasters or just climate change influencing where people can even live anymore. So it's gonna be a lot of things, and if you can't tell, hopefully from what I was able to describe to you, theme parks, amusement parks, water parks would have it, are a very risky venture and one of the most stressful things any business could ever try doing. Like, I think it takes like on average apparently 6 years for a new theme park to even like break even to be successful, and that's if everything goes right. And you can't rush it. Not in that, oh, you can just not in that, oh, I don't mean like, oh, you can't actually rush it. I mean, like, if you think you could wing this, people are going to notice. Such as the case for my last bad park, the infamous Lapland New Forest that once operated out in the UK, which promised that it would have real reindeer and animals, magic tunnel and light, a snow kind of like covered village, Santa and like elves and all that kind of stuff, and even a skate rink. And, well, here's what was delivered. Here's the snow covered village with the authentic gray, gravelly kind of dirt look. Here are those real animals that they promised us that you can clearly see are very real, including the very real reindeer. I think this was planned to be the ice skating rink that was obviously just going to happen. And rumor has it that, well, actually, not rumor has it, I think it was reported many times that the Santa and elf actors who would sometimes come and go with different costumings would not be so jelly after all. Some even insulting guests, some apparently maybe even getting into fights. So this was bad. this was not just like regular bad. This was like false advertising bad, and it was so much to a point that the two people who tried to orchestrate this whole disaster actually got put in jail for up to a year on account of false advertising back in, I believe, 2011 or it was 2013 maybe. But yeah, what a weird thing that was. So this now leads us though to the final part of this presentation and maybe the real gem that people were looking forward to, the real just what you were all on your seats. Finally, we've been the big drop. It's none other than, well, it's the weird. We're going to enter the twister zone, basically. We're at the point of no return. We'll see things that we could have never imagined could ever even belong at such a theme park. So, we'll start off though with something maybe less chaotic than the previous roller coaster I just tried to introduce to you with something that seems maybe a little like sound at first, where there's a park that was built in the UK again back around the early to mid 2000s that was meant to be themed around a classic British author. Now, excuse me, a lot of that can accompany a lot of different. There's a plethora of great British authors to choose to theme. J.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, J.K. Rowling, but they decided to go with a more true to name, like academic, canonical kind of author. We get the one and only theme park that was ever themed around good old Charles Dickens and the aptly titled Dickens World. So this was basically a theme park built kind of into a mall, but it was actually pretty well themed in a very theatrical way with a lot of the work at the lights and just the sort of design with some of the building facades. But it was very small and there was really not much to do. Like there was literally two attractions. One was a show, and the other one was this here boat ride that was themed to everyone's absolute favorite book, Great Expectations. And the ride water, the ride's water was authentically colored brown to match the sewers that would have occupied during this era of London where everything was just so covered in filth. Isn't this exciting for kids? Oh, it even had animatronics. Like there's even Pippin doing his Blair Witch impersonation and many other just wonderful sights of hollow fake blocks. So I don't know about you, but that didn't really last very long and I can see why it didn't, but Dickens World was certainly a venture to one thing. But now we're going to go down to Italy, where we get to go to basically the B movie version of this is the canon films Chuck Norris version of MGM Studios or Universal Studios, where we get the one and only Movie Studios Park, which features this here theme park and another additional water park that has its own craziness I wish I could cover, but I can't. But this is literally that Italian B movie version of what I just mentioned, Universal Studios, where it has the similar kind of themes and stuff, but it just cuts out all the pretentious crap about, oh, this is going to be a real park where you get to learn how the movies are. It's like, no, this is going to take everything that you see at those places, but we're going to concentrate to the best point. And I just need to prove that this was in Italy with all these wonderful this is what you get for your salad dressings. That's great. But we get to see this type of attraction though, this type of mindset, just in the very first type of ride they get to the park. Like remember that old Hollywood tram ride you got where you just kind of go around like little fake like props and like little design and like little like showcase studios when it's like, hey, we get to make this video. None of that is on there. There's no pretense that anything's gonna be really filmed here at Movie Studios Park. You're going on an excursion where, as you'll find out, everything is gonna blow up. And there's no like little studio like buildings. It's all just like wasteland, apocalypse, Half-Life place. And do you know what that means? Everything's gonna explode or just shoot water at you. There's not gonna be like some annoying like person trying to talk to you about this is where we filmed this right here. It's just everything's coming at you. Everything's exploding. You'll never know what happens. You may be going up, but then you realize the operator just cuts the brakes and you get splashed and dunked on. Oh, and they even have their own version of the Tower of Terror. See, I told you. Look, go up, you move, and you drop. It's the same thing. Clearly. Oh, they don't even, and they even remember that old Terminator ride, the 3D show. Well, it's not gonna be just 3D here at Movie Studios Park. It's gonna be 5D the game. What does it make 5D the game? It's the most insane thing ever. It truly does have the emozioni forte where they use real actors, real fire, and even real blanks in the gun. That's what makes it 5D. You get to experience the joys of it. Tennis. Whenever the actor fires off the shotgun, just recreating another day here at Movieland Studios in the life of Hollywood. It's great. Oh, and they even have their own unique UF571 submarine simulator ride, which, guess how this goes. I'll show you. You board a submarine, what looks like a submarine, into what is basically a missile with some like boxes from Metal Gear Solid just like taped onto it. And what happens is that you get under attack and it floods. So you just get soaked inside this little like capsule, simulating what it's like to be trapped. This is it, baby. Again, there is just no BS at this park. You just gotta go and feel the rawness of true filmmaking at the one and only Italy's Movieland Park. I love it. Now, the next section I have to cover is not one that's solely about one particular park, but is actually a park that featured many themes of a many different beloved character. One that somehow can't even escape weirdness, even in the form of a theme park. So I have to introduce to everyone none other than weird Sonic the Hedgehog stuff at theme parks. So we'll have to first start by going back actually to Alton Towers in the UK, where we have a former ride known as Toyland Tours. Now, it's creepy in these pictures because it's all slowed down and this ride's gone, but it was kind of like those It's a Small World ride where it's just like everything's moving, everyone's playing like this happy-go-lucky song all around you. It's a kids kind of a thing. But since this ride was constructed in like 1992, that was basically like peak Sonic time. So you had this little Sonic room during the ride where they created a little animatronic of Sonic who would just kind of turn his head with this lever. But the thing is, you weren't supposed to look at Sonic like straight through his into his eyes or when he was turning his head, because if you did, well, Sonic looked like this. Yeah. So what a fun face to remember. If you squint your eyes, it almost looked like he had a Garfield smile. But we have to move on though into down to the southern hemisphere, but we don't go to South America. We instead go to that one place upside down, good old Australia at Seagate World Sydney, which is how they pronounced it over there, in this very Y2K aesthetic kind of theme park. Like, just look at it. It's like a bunch of arcade games and stuff. This was like when theme park designers thought the future of like theme parks was going to be arcades. They didn't contemplate the fact that people didn't think about like Smash Bros or GTA ever being a thing. They thought people would still want to play like Daytona USA 4 and stuff. I still do, but that was back then. But this park had one thing that cannot be replaced through a PS5 or Xbox One or whatever. It had Sonic the Hedgehog puppet show featuring Sonic and Tails, and I don't know who the bird thing is, but they would come out and they'd like sing and stuff. Which, keep in mind though that this park was dated. These pictures are dated in '98, the same year Sonic Adventure came out, so they were still dated. But you couldn't have a Sonic show without antagonists or even other supporting characters, right? Where we have Dr. Robotnik, whose nose is an island in a sea of black, and good old Sally. Remember Sally? I think she. It looks like she was just studying too hard, for like all those like chemistry, physics, and calculus exams. I don't know. She needs help. Isn't this so good and great? Well, you know what? I think it's so good in that we could all actually go buy the soundtrack to the whole show, which is available on YouTube, by the way, and then also get these top mega weapon sound plushies where Dr. Robotnik is like wanting to cry or looks like a redneck man, and Tails needs to be on like a Marilyn Manson cover album. I don't know. I can't believe it. I personally love it, I think, but obviously this isn't going to appeal to everyone, so maybe what we need to be doing is not look or have Sonic be in the hands of some weird foreigners who don't get us. So instead, maybe let's see what Japan themselves can do with Sonic so that they're not just, I don't know, doing whatever they want with him. Which we'll take a look at some other Japanese stuff real quick of Sonic, but they they did some weird things, I guess, with this arcade kind of stuff. Some that is not like maybe what we've just seen, but I still think is worthy to talk about, such as Sega thought it'd be a good idea to make Sonic a police officer, which this is very, very problematic, and we need to call him out on Twitter about this because this is not okay. But they also made Sonic like a space cadet, which is exactly what I want Sonic to be. The world's fastest hedgehog who's now trapped in like a capsule and stuff. But then they also made like Sonic popcorn, where while you were getting your popcorn, you had to chase away like Robotnik and stuff, who does the absolute most fabulous running animation the world has ever seen. If you go look it up, and Sonic also looks like a Powerpuff Girl in this, but that's kind of the worst that Japan kind of did with Sonic. So that's kind of, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, it, depending on how you view it, for Sonic stuff in theme parks. But we now we go back to Europe, to a little place called Bonbon Land. This is a park out in Denmark, just like Tivoli Gardens, which is a park that's kind of themed around a bunch of different characters that the creators kind of come up with and stuff. It's all kind of cool stuff like you know Disney or whatever. But the thing is though, they kind of have a very unique kind of look that the creators put into them, where the characters they're kind of they're I don't know. Okay, let me be okay. I'm gonna actually be tell you the truth. So Bonbon Land is actually more akin to like a Danish Hershey Park, in that Bonbon are a confectionery company who create just their own candy and whatnot, obviously, but their edge to stand out in the market of a bunch of other candy companies was to come up with a bunch of little characters that do like a bunch of grotesque or toilet humor type of things. And just like how DreamWorks broke out, had a character break out with like Shrek, Bon Bon's breakout character was a little dog named Henry Hundbrut, which basically just means Henry the Fart Dog. And they represented this here dog by adding the first roller coaster to this park, the Hundbrut Rutenbachen. That was an epic Danish moment brought to you by me, which is kind of what you would think. It is the dog fart roller coaster. And, well, so far we haven't seen any farts yet, but we've certainly seen some droppings, which is a reference, I guess, to the candy, so, among other things. But if you're don't be disappointed just yet, because this roller coaster, while it might be small, goes through the house, or at least the dog house, where there'll be a little speaker that blasts you with a fart as you just circle around it and exit. So you truly do get the booty blast that we were hoping for in such a name, with such a straightforward name like the dog fart roller coaster. So I'm satisfied, but what other types of attractions would a park with these types of characters have? Well, among many other things, including, like, I guess, an ant who needs to relieve himself, and a mice who likes to live with trash, and another one that I haven't shown, but is a bunch of rats who like to eat like rancid cheese and vomit. There is It's mainly just a kids park that's kind of about, just hanging out and seeing all like the funny characters doing naughty things. And this is probably most well represented in this new character, who's kind of like, how Disney has like hidden Mickeys, where if you look at like Elsa's toes, they form like a little Mickey silhouette, and they're like hard to find and stuff. There's kind of a character like that too, who, well, it's not around as much as I guess she used to be. Is definitely still will still be there in some way, shape, or form. But you do got to go out of your way to find her if you can. So that'll be a fun little journey and challenge. But that's mainly the whole point of Bonbon Land, is just to have this kind of inappropriate, well, I guess not really inappropriate, but more so just toilet humor stuff that kids find funny, because it's like that's what kids will just enjoy, you know. Kids think farting is funny. Kids think like weird toes and Jeb Bush is funny or whatever. Garfield go home indeed. So that is the magic, I guess, of Bonbon Land. And I don't know though, seeing these like seeing these double-lipped Sonics and these cow boobs, it's kind of been dragging me down faithfully. Like I feel like my spirit is drained. I really need to find that again. It's just kind of worrying me. Oh Lord. Let's get out of this weird, crazy Europe. Let's go back to U.S. Let's go back to Florida. Let's go to Orlando, like real Americans, and let's go to. In fact, I need to go to. I need to go find my spirituality here. I need to get connected with the Bible again. I think I know the perfect opportunity to do it in Orlando. We'll go to the fourth like park resort place, one after Universal, Disney, SeaWorld and stuff. We'll go to the Holy Land Experience. Yes. Oh yes. That is exactly what I'm talking about. I am feeling it. I just need to get back to this place and really feel my reaffirming with the Lord and the Bible, and with him, and with the man himself. I'm already seeing it true with all these animals too. Like we got an elephant, we got horsey, giraffe, and it all awaits us just behind these here gates. In fact, I think we'll see the first spot of the man himself. There he is! Look at him, he's so happy to see us, and he's really white. Oh man. Oh, but before we go further, I want to make a stop by the Kiddie Land because, I still want to go have some like fun on the little rides and stuff. So let's go to Kiddie Land, shall we? We have to enter this dude's mouth and like good old Jonah, and on our way into the that said land, we get to see that not only did whales eat humans, but they also apparently ate like giant clams in this brand new, never before seen marine biology lesson that like it was so secret that BBC couldn't film it for like Blue Planet, so they had to cut that. The clips of these baleen whales who don't have any like strong teeth, who eat krill all the time. They also apparently eat giant clams. The Holy Land experience. Doing a real at you, teaching you all the good stuff. So after this wonderful, really totally accurate lesson in marine biology, we finally get to the Kiddie Land. It's like a really expensive elementary school fair, just like the one I always wanted to go to. They even got arcade games where Jesus gives you his basketballs. My favorite part is that whether or not you score or miss, the ball will always bounce non-disrespectfully off the American flag right back to you, like God intended. Oh Lord, yes, I feel it. That's what I'm talking about. All right, I think I've had my good times in Kiddie Land. Let's get back on track, where we see good old the sea being departed, Moses departing the sea, who also the Bible didn't tell us this, or even maybe any other sort of book like this didn't tell us, but he was attacked by, I guess, flying megalodon sharks as the sea departed, just like God intended. But we finally get to see the park itself, and it's full of this wonderful stuff. It's mainly filled with a bunch of like kind of landscaping and like shows and stuff. A lot of them, some of them are pretty well themed, or at least meant to be recreations of stuff that we commonly see, or even just other kind of like dramatic shows, stuff to keep us entertained. There's not a whole lot of rides here, obviously, but it does have one ride that may just rival like the Wizarding World, all the Wizarding World, and all of Star Wars land. One ride that just knocks the socks off of anything I've ever seen before. The Holy Land experience has the Jesus boat. This was the boat that apparently Jesus used. This picture frame floating in the grass tells me it's correct, so it must be the boat. Let's see it. There it is. Oh yes. Oh yeah. That's what I'm talking about. This is what I need. I needed to really come to terms with my faith and really see this stuff again. I needed to feel like I can walk on water as a cardboard while he is risen. That is exactly what I'm telling you. And you know, I feel better. I just need to feed my soul. Now that I'm done feeding my soul spiritually, I'm ready to physically just satiate my hunger. And good thing that God is looking after me by my side because he gives us the Holy Land experience has only one restaurant. Chick-fil-A. It doesn't get any better than this. Oh man. Oh, the Holy Land experience. That's what did it to me. That's what we all needed. We all needed this religious park that I can go to on my way to Disney to feel one connected to God. But how could I possibly, though, find something that's maybe even weirder than that? Or maybe even over the top? How can I top this? Well, I don't know if I can ever top something like that, but in the very last thing I want to present, I'd like to introduce to everyone the most legendary roller coaster ride that the world will possibly ever see in quite some time, one that to this day legends are still being written about. It is none other than the little coaster that couldn't, Orphan Rocker. Now, what exactly is Orphan Rocker? What the heck does that mean? Well, we have to go back to Australia, where we go back once again to Sydney, but instead we go a mile, well, not a mile, but an hour out west into the big old mountainous parts of Australia, where we got this wonderful scenic world here with an actual little orphan rock that you can see on your right, being the namesake part of this just wonderful natural land formation. Now, this park scenic world kind of opened as like a, you know, place to come check out this wonderful site and this incredible just view. But in the 80s, they decided that we can't just have it be that we have like a sky ride or a little scenic railway. We're going to install a roller coaster, the Orphan Rocker, named after again the namesake Orphan Rock. But this isn't just going to be any little roller coaster. This is going to be the first Aussie manufactured, designed roller coaster just in the country. There's never been a country with that claim before. And this is something that was really hyped up in like the mid 80s as just being one of the next big things in the roller coaster industry. Because not only was it going to be, again, Australia's entry into the roller coaster market, but it was going to be a unique type of roller coaster where the cars would kind of swing back and forth in a way that's not dissimilar from the modern day Seven Dwarfs Mine Train roller coaster over in Magic Kingdom. Unfortunately, though, the stuff just happened, and the roller coaster never was able to officially open and continues though to just kind of fall into a state of disrepair. But here's the thing. It's not just though that this roller coaster fell into a state of disrepair. It almost seemed like though once you start to look a bit more into and investigate more about this roller coaster, it almost though seems like from day one that this coaster was just never going to work. As in, not just that, like it's almost just like no one could even ride it, and everything about it was just like a sham in a weird way. Like, for one, people would kind of noticing it's like the transitions that were kind of on here were something was off about them. I don't know if it was the design plans or if it was the manufacturing's kind of thing at fault, but something was just like not right. And it just didn't even seem like to a point that even the people who were writing it were even there, like writing the ride at all, as if it was just kind of a thing they faked that too, where it's like, if this ride almost seems so like intense to a point where it's just unrideable, and to a point where they just had to fake it to show off that as if the ride was maybe going to work or had progress. And it's just kind of weird because rumor has it that there would be people that, not just that there are people, but there are clips of the ride on the old shows supposedly operating, but I don't know. Like, okay, take for example with this picture, with the one I just showed you with like the girls in it and stuff. That's just literally the train right outside of its like storage area where they just could have pushed the train like by hand, asked like random people to just kind of get in the train, smile real quick, then get out, and they could just then push the train back in and just keep it in storage without ever having to really go on the main track. So they don't have to, so they can show people that hey, people can maybe ride the roller coaster, but not really when it's actually on its main course. And even in this picture, like this is I think supposed to be on the main course, but everyone on the main like this layout, but everyone's looking at the camera and like they're smiling. There's not, and people have like long hair almost, but their wind isn't being blown. It's like they pushed it or had it remained there, stopped, had to smile for the camera, and I don't know, just then kind of transitioned. So it almost seemed to kind of beg this question to people who would sort of dig this up and hear about us on the news and also from archive later was like, what's this? What's wrong with this ride? What went wrong with it? Why is it not opened? And why is Scenic World refusing to tell anyone about it? I mean, okay. Maybe let's face the reality behind this ride not opening from what we've seen with the really weird transitions and just the overall kind of really lush landscape that this coaster's having to fight against. It was probably maybe something like because it was so new by a completely new company and designers, engineers into this industry that it maybe just didn't get approved by like the state to actually operate by like engineer corps, or maybe there just wasn't enough funding to actually get things under control. Maybe all those things kind of happened. It's probably some an uninteresting reality like that, but the thing is, it's like it just seems still so frustrating because this isn't like no one. This isn't like a roller coaster that you find in the corner. If you park into this little, into like the little like parking lot over there, you see this, and you're like, that is a roller coaster. So I don't know what it really is though. This roller coaster again, it's probably a financial burden to try to operate this, and maybe we'll never actually see the light again. But why haven't they still announced it yet? And why are they kind of keeping it so just distance for a while? And why are they still? What happened to all the hype that even surrounded it when it opened in the first place? Like, again, it was for a long time unconfirmed that anyone has even ridden this roller coaster. It wasn't until I think 2019 when there was an actual clip of someone riding it, and even in that brief clips of what it looked like the ride POV as well as the rider's seat kind of like point of view, it was just way too like intense to a point where it was just like going to just tear the track apart. So why do they keep it so secretive? Why don't they just go up front and really allow the truth to be revealed? Will we ever find out? Truthfully, I don't know. But that's only if we let it stay unknown. If we work together, maybe donate enough money, maybe get in contact and organize with the people behind Scenic World, the engineers, maybe the truth one day shall be revealed. So that's what I'm hoping to end this panel on, to give people inspiration to look at this stuff a little further, see what's out there. And that is again what's going to bring this panel here to its conclusive end. So I want to thank everyone for watching, for maybe sticking around it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day here at SwampCon, as well as I hope you get to have a nice time checking out any of the other panels that are coming forward next. And I hope to see you again at the sister panel, the Japanese theme parks and roller coaster panel that I will also be hosting. And if you have any further questions or concerns, you can simply email me at my sswilliam.143@gmail.com, and I'll hopefully be able to get back to you. So I'll end it here with this Tom and Jerry roller coaster themed around a picnic where you have to fight against ants, bananas, and cake, just like God intended. Thank you so much again for watching, and please enjoy the rest of your stay here at SwampCon 2021. Thank you.